Welcome to episode 51 of Discourse in Magic. I am very excited to bring you this episode with John Archer. Now, this is, I think, one of the most helpful episodes that we have ever recorded if you are a performing magician. Particularly if you're a performing magician looking to add comedy to your act. This basically has it all. It tells you where you can get your material, how to get your material, how to edit your act down, what to do when you're starting. Things to look out for. It is so packed with value, and it is brought to us from a legend, John Archer. So tune in. I'm sure you're going to love it. And if you don't, then you can have your money back. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic, your podcast that has nothing to do with method. So put away your packs of cards, take away your funky gimmicked books or whatever. It's time to talk about theory. Of course, my name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with the one and only John Archer. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'd just like to talk through my one-handed cut, if I might. We're not doing that. Okay.
No. We are just doing the regular stuff today.
The ordinary stuff. The stuff that makes it work.
Yeah,
exactly. The stuff that makes it work. And where we usually start is at the beginning. So how did it all start for you? How did magic get into your world?
It was not the usual way, to be honest. I didn't really sort of get into... really sort of interested in doing magic till I was about 19, which is obviously months ago now. And you weren't meant to laugh at that, but thanks, guys. So I sort of had a vague interest because I had an uncle who used to do just one card trick every Christmas family get together. He had one card trick that he used to do, and that sort of piqued my interest. I always thought it was fascinating, just having this thing that I could see and not work out how it was done. But I never really got into it. Then I somehow acquired Henry Hayes' Amateur Magician's Handbook, and that was just sort of I don't know where I got it from, or whether it was a gift or what. I seem to remember it was a second-hand copy I had anyway. And I learned how to do a French drop from there. And that was all I used to do, is just now and again vanish a coin, just messing about. And then I went to art college, and right across the road I went to art college in London. And right across the road from my art college was a little magic shop called Alan Allen's Magic Spot, which was run by the late great Alan Allen. Yeah. You couldn't call him Alan unless you knew him well. I didn't know him that well.
It had to be Mr. Allen, right?
Well, it was Alan or Alan. I called him Alan. But yeah, so I started going there. Really just sort of lunch breaks, and whenever I had a bit of spare time, I'd sort of rush out of college, go across the road and watch what was going on. And he was a great guy. He was just rude to everybody, throw people out. And there's so many magicians in sort of UK who got into magic by sort of persisting with trying to stay in the shop when he'd tell them to get out and look in the window and stuff. And I was just sort of enthralled by the madness of it all. He was a real crazy character with a big 6-inch nail through his nose, and eyeballs in coffee cups on the counter. It was just a mess of cigarette ash and just your typical traditional old style bricks and mortar magic shop with that sold jokes as well. But he wasn't bothered about the jokes. If somebody came in wanting to buy a joke, he would throw them out. If he found out once he knew you genuinely interested in magic, he would throw everybody else out and he would lock the door, and he would just he would just talk to you about magic. And quite often I would get locked in with him, which is a bit. Thinking about it now was probably a bit scary, but at the time it was great. And I just started getting tricks off him, really, just 3-card Monty and coin unique and just all the standard stuff that people start with. And then some books. I remember him selling me a copy of Stars of Magic early on, and that was so. That's how it became sort of more than just a passing interest. It became like a hobby. And then after that, I joined a magic club, started doing bits of performances, and it just turned into a career eventually. But not the start of like a lot of people where they get a You know,
They get a magic set at the age of
magic
5,
kit when
and
they're a kid. I probably did have magic kits when I was a kid, but to be honest, I can't remember much about them if I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have an impact on you at that time.
It was certainly not a positive one, no.
What was the transition like into doing magic for a living?
Well, it was slow for me. It wasn't a big thing. Right now, I'm going to do this as a job. It probably happened over a 15-year period, really, before I was doing it full time. So I got back from art college, joined a local magic club up in the northeast of England where I live. And that happened to be the club that Paul Daniels came from, Middlesbrough Circle of Magicians. So they had a great pedigree of producing some great magicians. A guy called Pete Furman from the UK who comes from Middlesbrough Circle of Magicians. There was a great card guy called Kevin Ray who came from Middlesbrough Circle of Magicians, and quite a few other people who'd done quite well in magic. So there were a magic society that actually believed in going out and performing, and they'd regularly go out and do shows for schools and charities to raise money for the charities, but also just so that they could be performing. And they had and they had lots of competitions that were, you'd get points in different categories, so you had to become an all-rounder. So they'd have a competition one week, and your points would carry over. So you learn how to do close-up and stage and parlour, and you learned how to do manipulation and mentalism. And it was a really good society. Still is a really good society.
This sounds like an incredible magic club.
Yeah, it's a great magic club, but I think it just sort of happened by accident. It just had some members who thought, you know what, the whole reason we're doing this is because we want to perform. And it's amazing how many societies you go to and they just perform to each other and never go out and perform to non-magicians. So that sort of developed me as a performer. And then I started doing, charity shows myself and, little things at churches where people would ask me to come along and, do 10 minutes in between. And at the same time, I was a musician, so I played guitar and sang. And I was in a few bands. And then I was in. So that got me in front of an audience, just talking on a microphone to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were always performing.
Yeah. So I was, I was used to talking to an audience, and because I'm naturally sort of a bit comedic, I think I would allow that to happen in between songs. And then I was in a double act where I sort of said to the guy I was in this double act with, I said, I'd really like to do a trick between one of the songs. I'd love to do a trick. And he said, yeah, why not? So I did a trick. It was probably something like, I don't know, Invisible Deck or something. It wouldn't have been anything amazing. But, well, that is amazing, but nothing...
I was going to say, Invisible Deck's pretty solid.
Nothing amazingly unique.
Special,
It's a great trick, but nothing that was, specific to me. And it went really well, and I sort of started adding the odd trick between songs until it got to the point, really, where... the guy I was in the double act with was sat by the keyboard for 20 minutes at a time while I performed comedy and magic. So so we eventually split, and then I started doing it on my own, and it just became what I did, really.
And that's awesome. That's one of the first times I've ever heard a story of someone who sort of bought stage time from themselves, right? Like, he said, like, let's not, you know what, I could sing and play the guitar or whatever, but instead, why don't we just take 5 and I'll perform? And then that catches up with you. So that's
awesome.
Obviously, awesome and unique. And then it's sort of, I'm struggling to say this in the right way, but it seems like you came at it straight from the perspective of comedy magic, and you didn't trudge through the
stage illusions
or whatever, you didn't trudge through years of doing the wrong stuff, you didn't trudge through doing...
Pretty much. I knew right from the start, I knew that funny was who I was. So I never really did. I mean, some of my magic didn't have much comedy in it. There may have only been a few funny lines, but there was still funny moments. And
still like the engagement and the pacing, is on this comical uptick tick. You know what I mean? Like on this comical, like once you get a couple of laughs, just being on the edge of your seat when someone's speaking like that, is it's not funny, but they're smiling and engaging. Like that's
yeah. No, I always got the buzz from. I think from as much from getting the laughs as getting the gasps. I do love that thing of doing something and the audience just having that moment of realization that they have no clue what's just happened, how it worked, and I love that moment. But I love to hear the sound of laughter, and I love to just that thing of being able to make people laugh. It's just fantastic, and combining the two where you play with those things of. Hey, oh, that's funny. Oh, what a nice guy. And then what? I just love the way that those two things work together, and it's a real challenge because both of those elements can step on the toes of each other. The comedy can easily, remove that gasp, and the gasp can easily, eliminate the laugh. And so knowing where to put each one, I think is it's a real. I'm still learning it. I've been doing it professionally for 20 odd years now, and I'm still learning. Every routine, I'm thinking, where do I pull off the laughs and where do I push the routine and stuff.
Yeah, because if you get, just as an example, if you get a laugh too early before a punchline, before a magic punchline, you end up dulling it, right? You need to be able to bring them back and make sure they fully understand what happened, before you do the reveal. So you need to the jokes can freely come early on or after the reveal, but there's this window before where you kind of need to get serious or get clear about what the magic premise is.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's not just before the sort of the magic reveal. It's also all the points where elements of the trick
need to follow,
need to be remembered to make the trick seem impossible.
Yeah.
If you have comedy riding over the top of those things, people will forget how amazing it is. They'll forget the fact that that somebody was chosen at random, or that a deck of cards was checked and shuffled beforehand. So you've got to sort of, but then again, sometimes comedy can really reinforce those moments as well.
About to say.
So sometimes you can do something like in my tossed out deck routine. I get the deck checked and examined and shuffled, and I do a couple of callbacks to it. But that whole process is quite heightened comedy as I'm getting it checked. But it really just reinforces to the audience that moment did happen.
Yeah, they're going to remember it because they were laughing and engaged at that time, right?
Yeah. But like I say, it's like times when comedy will help in that way, and there's times when it won't, and the type of comedy will help or it won't. So it's a serious business.
Yeah. And how do you figure out which situation you're in? Is it just through working a routine time and time again and gauging the reactions, or do you have a system that you use? Or
a lot of it for me is just listening to the audience. When I get a new routine, I sort of try and listen to the audience, and I don't record them very much. I have in the past, but I find I'm much better at just being in the moment and aware of what's going on, and then making notes afterwards. But just try and listen to the audience, and you can tell when you do a routine, and it's I'm working on a routine at the moment, sort of based on a lottery prediction thing, and it's not quite a lottery prediction. It's sort of predicting some lottery numbers for a date that's already happened, and the trick's working. I've only performed it twice. I performed it last night and I performed it a few days ago. But it's not getting anywhere near what it should get. I mean, the trick is phenomenal. But 6 numbers are picked.
And, it sounds impossible already.
And they're there untouched beforehand. And I know what it is. I'm just not selling the moments right, and also there's not a lot of comedy in it at the moment because my comedy tends to come through improv and just performing the routine a lot. So. But I've got routines that 2 years ago were like that, and now they're really strong. So it's just listening to the audience and not being happy with mediocre, and thinking when you know it's worth more, you've got to work out why it's not getting more. And
so that's a good thing to chat about, because I know that it's something that I've experienced where I've picked a trick that I thought would be very fitting for a set. I've rehearsed it, and then I've performed it quite a few times. And then after each of them, I don't feel ecstatic about it. And at the end, I kind of want to replace it. And very recently, someone said to me, they said, I know you don't like it anymore. I know you're not happy about the trick anymore, but plow through. Keep doing it even though you don't think you like it, and you'll get through to the other side, where you found these moments and you like it again, and you've got this energy from it or whatever. And obviously that was true and that happened. So my question is, when someone's feeling sort of what you're describing right now, this is the first time they're putting a trick up. Maybe they've performed it 1 or 2 times, and it's getting a reaction that makes them, kind of like what you were saying, where like how could they be getting a reaction like this to something as impossible as this is, right?
Yeah.
What could somebody do, or what should somebody do to get that reaction as good as possible, as quick as possible, or get what they want out of that trick as soon as possible?
Do you know what? I wish I knew the answer to that. I think it is just it's perseverance, and experience really helps. I mean, somebody can tell me a trick, and they'll say, John, I think this trick will be great for you, and they'll tell me the trick, and I'll go, no, that won't work for me. Yeah. And they'll think they know what works for me, but I sort of, through doing it for so many years, I know what feels like a John Archer trick in my head and what doesn't. So experience really, really helps. Just knowing whether something's worth pursuing with anyway, right from the start, knowing what works for you. And there's no quick way of finding that out. You've just got to do enough routines that you sort of, what's good for you, what's right for you, and what isn't right for you. And we can all think of, magicians who, we know really well, like Kevin James or Rob Zabrecki, people like that, and you'd think, well, yeah, I can imagine what type of routine would suit them and what wouldn't, because their character's very well defined.
Yeah.
So I think knowing yourself really well helps, because it helps you save time, sort of persevering on routines that just aren't right for you. And then the other thing is just not being afraid to try different things. And I think I don't listen to lots of people, and that's not because I don't want to listen to people. It's just most people don't actually know what's right for me, or I don't really. This is going to sound bad, but I don't really trust their opinion.
Of course.
And that's not for any negative reasons, other than there's just some people who you sort of think they're on my wavelength, and I would listen to them. But once you find those people who you think, well, they do understand me a little bit, then listening to those people, and when they suggest, well, have you thought about trying, putting the reveal a little bit later on, or have you tried maybe doing this section and then having a break before you do this next section of the trick, or just or a million things that they could suggest, revealing it in a different way, or having it written down, or having it spoken, having it played to the audience. There's an infinite number of ways that tricks can go, but listening to people you trust is good, and deciding who those people you're going to listen to, who they are.
And it obviously makes sense to not want to take advice from everybody, because just numbers-wise, somebody who's been to 4 magic shows versus, probably you or any other magician who's performed, just let's say some random guy who's performed maybe a couple hundred, right? Why would someone who's performed a couple hundred shows take the advice from someone who's seen 2 as gospel, right?
Yeah.
It's possible that there might be a grain of knowledge, in that person's comment. Maybe what they're saying might highlight something that is wrong with the show, but it's very unlikely that they're going to be the person to come up with your solution. Your solution's going to be invented by a pro, or thought up by someone who
understands
does this exactly.
Yeah. No, that's right. And but it's not just about experience. I don't think. I mean, I've got friends who are brilliant magicians and and skillful and successful, but I wouldn't listen necessarily to all of those advice because, it's coming from a different place artistically to where I am, and them, even though they understand fully what they do themselves and they're brilliant at it, it might not necessarily fit in with me. And then there are other people I listen to who are not magicians at all, but who
they understand you.
Yeah, they understand. They've got I've got a good friend who's a stand-up comedian who I tour with. He's quite successful over here, and I do support whenever he does theatre tours and things. He's not a magician at all, but now and again he just says, "Well, why are you doing it like that? Why not like this? Or why don't you do that gag there?" And he's on a very similar wavelength to me comedically, even though we're not the same. But so I would listen to him, and he's not a magician.
But he definitely has like years of experience on the stage, right? Like he's drawing from being an entertainer himself and not from being an audience member.
That's true, but then I think sometimes there can be audience members who can give you good advice. My dad's not a magician, and he's 83 now, 84, he's something like that. He keeps having a birthday every year and ruining it for me. But he, he'll quite often watch. He's just sort of a working class, down to earth. He was a carpenter all his life. But he'll quite often watch a routine and he'll go, "Well, I suppose you must be doing that." And he sees he's quite smart. He's difficult to fool because he just sees logical ways of how things must be done. So quite often I'll listen to him. Quite often I'll show my dad a trick and I'll say, "What do you think?" And I'll wait for him to go, "Well, you must be doing that." And quite often he just goes for the obvious method. Well, you must have switched that, or you must have looked at it when you were looking at that, or something. So. Yeah, I don't think you always have to just listen to performers. You just have to listen to people.
I was going to say.
Yeah, you listen to people you trust.
Sound guy.
Sorry, say that again.
No, sorry. You're saying listen to people you trust, and that was exactly the point I was going to make. We have a good friend of ours who's Eric Leclerc. I'm sure he's totally fine with me saying this, but whatever. He takes, he always talks about his show with the guy that runs his lighting and sound, and that guy has no background in magic whatsoever, but now has a deep understanding of it because he's been working on a magic show for so many years, right? So, though he's not a magician and he's not a performer, he still has a very good understanding of what the audience is experiencing and always gives good pointers after shows.
Yeah, exactly. It's
about having people that you trust to get to bounce things off of and get ideas from.
Yeah, and also you can listen to different people for different things. Like I said, I'd get a different viewpoint from my dad than I would if, say, I asked Michael Weber, if I asked him about, I'd say, "Well, I want to do this. How do you think I should do it?" But, I know that he's going to come up with a lot of cool methods and ideas, or if he doesn't, he'll say, "You should read this or you should look at that." So just knowing who to speak to about what and who to listen to about what is smart, but it takes some getting there, really. When you first start, you're not going to know who to listen to. You're not going to know really what you want yourself. So it's unfortunately there isn't a shortcut to experience. You can't get 20 years experience in a week. And also. I remember somebody saying, "What is experience? Is it doing one thing 1,000 times or doing 1,000 things once?" And it's probably a mixture of all of that. Is it doing lots of things lots of times? And
what were you?
Do 10 things 100 times. Do 100
yeah, exactly.
Times,
Exactly. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is comedy magic, and I know that a lot of people that are listening, all they've ever known from magic is it being a little bit funny. All they've ever known. And when they go to make it up on stage, it's of course it's difficult to write funny things for your show.
Yeah.
So how do you recommend, what do you what's your process like? What do you recommend for somebody trying to put together a funny act or a funny set or a funny trick up on stage?
Okay. It's difficult, really, because I really believe that originality is really important. Just doing stuff that's original. But when you first start, it's impossible to do that. So I sort of agree to a certain extent that when you're first starting out, maybe you're just in your teens and you want to do some comedy, I think it's all right to use other people's routines. If the routines are being published, I've got DVDs with stuff out there that that's got comedy lines and everything in. I think that's fine to start with, just to find out who you are. I mean, I used to do a lot of Tommy Cooper gags, and when I first started, a lot of my routines were just standard comedy routines that I'd seen and borrowed and decided to do. And I think that's fine. First of all, just to learn a little bit about whether or not you've got the ability to make people laugh. But the problem is, if you're not careful, you start using other people's timing rather than your own. Because,
right.
I mean, I prefer, and I know a magician over here called Jeffrey Durham has sort of referred to timing as rhythm, and I sort of agree with him. I have always thought that timing is more about rhythm and the rhythm of your voice, and every performer has a different rhythm when they're on stage. And if you listen to comedians, it's almost like you can forget the words. You can listen to certain comedians and you will hear almost like a tune, a rhythm to the way they deliver. And that's different for every comedian. You listen to some real deadpan, slow deliveries. You'll hear really fast-paced deliveries. You'll hear people that deliver punchlines in 3 syllables, people that will deliver them in like a 3 and a 2 syllable pattern. And you hear those rhythms, and if you're not careful, you start copying somebody else's rhythm, and it isn't your own voice. And that's where you start struggling with that thing where you're not people say, you should be yourself, and that's not always true. You can be a character, but finding your own rhythm is difficult when you're doing other people's material, because you naturally deliver their gags in the rhythm that they deliver them, because that's the way they work. So eventually you've got to get to the point where you start trying to do your own stuff. And for me, the way it works, and this isn't the only way. I mean, you can go to writing classes and they'll give you all sorts of different ways to do it. But for me, the way it works is when I'm coming up with a new routine, I have a sort of skeleton of a script of where I want it to go. So I'll know that I'm going to talk, say the tricks about coincidence. I know I'm going to talk about coincidence, and then I'm going to talk about a specific coincidence, and then I'm going to get somebody up to help me, and then I'm going to ask them to do this with something. So I'll know there are certain points that have to be hit throughout the routine to get me to the end. But I don't really know what lines I am going to necessarily use between those moments, or even at those moments. And I'll start performing that routine in my set with other stuff that's already working. And I'll improvise, I'll ad-lib a lot, but I always know where I'm heading, so I'm never going to get lost. I always know at the next point I've got to be there, so I will ad-lib. And what I find is, because I thrive sort of in that sort of ad-libby moment of somebody up on stage with me and seeing what I'm going to say, funny things will come out, and those funny things get remembered. And I'll put them in the next night, and what happens is that skeleton then becomes a script, and I never really write them down unless I'm writing them down for a DVD or a book, or I'm going to publish it somewhere. But it just develops. Now that works for me, and I find that the lines come out naturally in my rhythm because I'm saying them in a very natural way. They're not jokes that I've written the night before and remember them and saying them in a written way. But that doesn't work for everyone. But that's sort of the way it works for me, is to ad lib. But trying to be original. Certainly once you've got that confidence on stage and you've been doing whatever material that works for you, trying to be original and think about a routine that's different and lines that are different, and because that's what'll get you noticed. You won't get noticed doing
other people's stuff.
Yeah, you're doing Michael Finney's 6-card repeat, and then doing Matt King's cards across or rope routine. People say, oh, he's very good, but they'll still say, but he's doing so and so's routine. And agents and bookers and TV people know these guys, and they know that you copy. So if you want to, you'll always be able to get work doing those routines. Don't get me wrong, but if you want to have success, where people within your industry respect you, and also outside of the industry, sort of, want to get involved, then originality is what you want to be trying to get to in the end.
And I think I really like the idea of, using other people's published material to be good enough to sort of learn your pacing and cadence, your what did you call it, rhythm, and deliver jokes the way that you would. And I think as you were explaining it about comedy and how you can use other people's published jokes or whatever, all that was ringing in my head was the exact mirror truth for magic, And I've been saying it to people forever, like, if the trick is published, just go learn to perform, please.
Yeah.
Like, just go do it and learn to perform. You will, and I think about some of my favorite magicians' routines. And when I think about it as being theirs, even though they didn't invent it. And it's because they've been doing it for so long that it has evolved, And one time they were doing a method, a whole routine that wasn't theirs, but now all it probably has is the trick. The premise of the trick is the same, and now it looks different, it feels different, the method's different, there's different jokes, and that's how it evolves. That's how people, and the perfect example is kind of what we just came up with, which is Matt King Cards Across, right? Like, he didn't invent Cards Across, right? And to his routine, though, is iconic. It is an iconic piece of magic. It is original, it's creative, it's brilliant, it's all of this different stuff, and clearly, without a doubt, it stemmed from something that existed before.
No, right? Exactly. Well, I think the same thing about Williamson when you see him doing Rocky Raccoon.
I was with him yesterday.
Yeah. Well, Rocky. He'll admit that Rocky wasn't his. He sort of. I can't remember the guy who showed him Rocky, but he's so much made that routine his. And
that's exactly right.
That if you see anybody else doing the Raccoon routine, you just think, it's not Williamson, exactly. and that's always going to be the case, unfortunately. And until somebody says, well, do you know what? It's not going to be a raccoon, and I'm not going to do those gags, and I'm not going to do the eating and the dance. I'm going to do something totally different with it. And somebody could do that, and have success. But just being brave enough at the start, copy it and learn the rhythm and the routine. But eventually, you've got to say, now I drop that. And that's the hard thing, is dropping stuff that's not yours and putting more stuff that is yours in.
Each sort of step, when you look at your magic and you want to evolve, like every now and then you stop and you look at your show or your trick or your routine, and then you're not happy again, right? And that's the cycle of being an artist and a creator, and it's creating, and then reflecting and going, what the heck? What was I thinking? Like, it's time to step my game up, And and then doing it again.
Yeah, you're right. I'm glad I'm listening to you now. I'm learning a lot.
How difficult is it to... this sounds like a stupid question, but I want to say, like, how difficult is it to be funny? I want to say how difficult is it to be naturally funny, but that sounds stupid. But, like, how difficult is it to be funny? Like, you're not taking lines, you're not trying to do someone else's comedy routine. For a lot of people, like, magic is the base of what they're doing, but they are not going to be able to keep attention for however long without them laughing. So how does one get funny outside of lines?
That's a stupid question.
I know.
Do you know what? I don't know, because I have times when I find being funny really, really easy, and I'm just in the zone, and it's almost like, and the audience are with me, and it feels like I could say anything and the audience will laugh, and that's great when you get in that position. But then there are other times where I'm just thinking, I don't know what. What to say, or lines that I've used 1,000 times and got great laughs with, you do them and they don't. So but I think I do think there is such a thing as funny bones. I do think there is such a thing as people who are naturally funny, And I do think there are people who are probably never going to be great comedians. But then I think there is a big chunk in the middle who are maybe not funny bones. I don't know where I lie in this, by the way, but there are people in the middle who are maybe haven't got funny bones, aren't naturally funny, but can learn how to do it. There's I don't know if you've seen on Facebook, they've been advertising this Steve Martin comedy masterclass thing, which I've paid $90 and
So have I, and
yeah,
a few other major magicians.
Yeah, no, I paid $90. I'm just fascinated. You know, he's a hero of mine. I'm looking forward to listening to everything he says. But one of the things he says is that he didn't think he's naturally funny. He doesn't think he's a funny guy. He learned how to do it. I find that hard to believe because I just, whenever I watch him, I just think he just naturally got it. But I do think it's hard, but I think it's.
So the answer to the question is get the masterclass.
Yeah, sign up for
right?
Steve Martin.
Well, I think that Steve Martin masterclass is going to be great. I hope it's going to be great. I hope it's not going to be, it's not going to be thanks for your $90, I'm off. But
yeah, exactly. I've heard great things about the other master classes, so I'm hoping good things out of it.
Yeah. I think it's not out for about another month and a half, 2 months, is it? So we can.
We'll talk about it then. We'll talk about where.
Definitely.
If we think it's been helpful when we started. One of the things I wanted to chat about, which sort of just came about with what you were saying, was Steve Martin's master. No, I'm kidding. I wanted to talk about whipping up a crowd. Like, it's one thing to put jokes in your show to get laughs or whatever, but kind of what you were just talking about, which is like some nights, like, they're just with you. They're with you in your rhythm, and you've already sort of won them over for a few jokes, and now you've just sort of whipped them up.
Yeah.
And that's something that, depending on how often you've performed, and I mean, if you've performed any serious amount, you know what that's like, and whether you know what it's like by whipping them up in magic, you know, like, and that is also a very real thing, or whipping them up in comedy or whatever, that they're in like a frenzy,
They're connected with you. They're
I was just wondering, can you touch a little bit on that? Obviously, not how do you do it, whatever, but anything about what that's, how to get that energy going.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the gig, because you can get to some gigs where, if it's a comedy club and there's been comics on before you, then the audience can be with you right from the start before you've even done anything. The audience are like, ready for it, and you can just go on and get straight into material, and you don't have to worry about getting them on. If it's a thing where they've just come to see you and they've paid money to come and see you, and they've been sat in the chairs in a theatre, waiting for half an hour for you to come on. Sometimes you don't have to do very much. Sometimes you just, but that not many of us get that position. I rarely get the position where people have paid to just come and see me at a theatre. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum where, you're doing a corporate event where nobody's paid to see you. They don't actually want to watch anything. They just want to drink beer and chat to each other. And you've got to get their attention. And it's when you're doing comedy and magic, it's not just whipping them up comedically. It's not just getting them, laughing. It's getting them laughing and in a mood to watch magic. And sometimes the challenge is to make them realise that what you're going to do is not going to fit in with what they think magic is, because it's changed a little bit in the UK recently because of people like Dynamo and Derren Brown and David Blaine, even, where magic's a little bit cool again, but there's still that slight thing of, is he going to produce silk handkerchiefs from a velvet bag? So you've sort of, sometimes you've got multiple things. So just assuming it's a hard crowd, the first 2 or 3 minutes, you've got to let them know you're funny, and you've got to let them know that you're not their stereotypical magic act. Or maybe you are, but let them know that you're very, very good at doing what they thought you were going to do. Just having the right lines and knowing at what point the audience are. You don't want to go into an audience who are really, hyper ready for comedy and magic, and then say, right, do you know what? I need to teach you how to be an audience, and you start going through almost like a warm up routine with them, which is something I do for really cold audiences. I will go on and literally teach them 3 types of audience. I have a technique where I teach them, this audience, then each one gets more
louder. Or whatever.
Yeah. It's basically an audience at a cricket match, and then it's an audience at a ballet, and then it's an American TV chat show audience, and I get people involved. Now, I don't like to do that all the time if it's not needed, because it's time, it's dead time if they're already
they're already
there.
on board.
But if they're not already on board, then I will do that. So you've got to know where your audience is at before you start, and you've got to know what level of work you need to do with them, and sometimes it's more important to let them know that you're funny than that your magic's great, and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes, if they've seen comedians, say in a comedy club situation, and then I'm on and I'm doing comedy and magic, I'm less worried about the comedy. I'm more worried about the fact that
the magic to
I want them.
slay.
I want
That's a different thing.
Yeah, well, also I just wanted to buy into the fact that the magic is going to be worth watching as well, and that I'm not going to be bad at comedy because I'm doing magic. So every audience is different, and I think it's the same with hecklers. I think it's dangerous to have a set approach for a heckle, or say if somebody says this, I will say, "Isn't it sad when cousins marry?" Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Just sort of being brave enough to say, well, this is the situation, analysing it before you go on and thinking, I need to do this. I mean, sometimes you can look at an audience and you can see areas where they're not interested, or if other acts have been on before, you can see potential hazards of tables that aren't watching or whatever. And the same with corporates, you can see the tables that are talking and think, how can I get them involved? What do I need to say? What's happened before that I might need to address, or is there an elephant in the room that needs to be, so I think it's dangerous to have a set approach. I think with every audience, you've got to go in thinking, what does it need at what point? Yeah. And obviously, opening lines are very important. Opening gags that let the audience know who you are very important. And if you have a certain look, sometimes addressing that issue is good. If you're 7'3" and you've got bright red hair, and you walk on stage and don't mention that, then the audience are going, they're sat there thinking, he looks like a friction match. What's going on? So I think just having lines, knowing what you need to do beforehand, and committing to it. But I'd be reluctant to say there is any one set way of doing it, really.
Well, that's good to hear that, it's sort of different every time, and I think it's good advice to go out there, and this is something that I've been playing with recently, is trying to really understand the energy and the levels that your audience has when you go out there. You know, and like, there's a world obviously where you wanna have a little bit more energy than they do, but if the discrepancy between your energy and the audience energy is too big, if you go out there, hi everybody, blah blah blah, then it feels like jarring, and the same thing as if your energy is too low, then they're like, who is this guy? Like, should this guy really be on this stage right now?
Yeah, and that can be venue based as well. If you go into a theatre, that holds 3,500 people, and you wander on and just do conversational, quiet stuff, it doesn't feel right. And also, body language becomes bigger. If you're in a theatre that holds 3,500 people, a gesture where you might just do a gentle shrug of your shoulders needs to be a big shrug of the shoulders in a 3,500 seat theatre. And if you hold your hands out, to gesture like a warm, hey, how are you? And you hold your arms out. In a big theatre, you'll hold them out higher and wider, and if you're in a comedy club that holds 50 people, your arms, hey, how are you doing? It's just you suit. It's like that, it's like they say about a goldfish growing to the size of the tank it's in.
Yeah.
It's sort of how you've got to be as a performer. You've got to fit the environment, and also fit the level of the audience. If the audience are quiet and you go out too loud, as you said, or vice versa, it's inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just repeating you because you said a really good line. I thought I'd get,
Yeah, take it.
Yeah, cut your bit out and just make it sound like I came up with all of that.
Well, what I'll do is if I pull a quote afterwards, I'll say that you said it.
Yeah, perfect.
So one of the things that I want to ask is, if there's a young guy, 16 or 17, and he's looking up to you with what you've been doing, what would you tell him? As in, how would you, what advice aside from work hard very often, do it a lot, would you be able to give him that he might not be able to get?
That's a hard one.
I know. I also sort of painted you into a corner there by taking away all the easy ones.
Yeah, I mean that is my standard thing to anybody is, work as much as you can, as often as you can, wherever you can. That's the thing. I mean, then the next thing would be, aim towards originality, even if you don't start that way. Aim towards that. I think listening to the audience is a really big thing that I think a lot of performers don't do. I'm a big believer in listening to them. It's amazing how many acts, I've watched and they come off stage saying, wow, they were great, weren't they? And I go, well, yeah, they laughed, but there was lots of big gaps where they weren't laughing, and people, I know people talk about this term, laughing ears, where you hear laughter that's not there, or you hear much more laughter than there actually is. Yeah. So listening to the audience, trying to be original, perform as much as you can. I mean, it's all standard stuff. The reason it's standard is because all the guys have been and done it. Have realised that's what the secrets are. I don't think I've discovered anything that anybody else hasn't discovered, really.
It's a joke that we've been joking about on the podcast. We're like 51, 52 episodes deep, and it seems like everybody's answer to every single question is, if you want to be good at it, do it a lot.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, we knew that at the get-go.
Yeah.
But it's just funny, like we asked the creative guys, we're like, how do you be creative? They're like, oh, create all the time. We asked the performers, we're like, how do you be a great performer? They're like, oh, I don't know, maybe just perform always. How do you be really funny? They're like, go on stage and do funny stuff all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
but it's true,
No, it is true. But it's not just performing all the time, because, if you start bad and you just perform like that constantly, you'll just end up being a very experienced bad performer. So it is about and there are lots of them, you do see them, you watch magic acts and they're not that great. There are lots, and it's the same in comedy and music and every other facet of entertainment. I'm not just saying magicians are guilty of it, but the secret is to perform as much as you can. But that thing of listening to your audience and constantly changing, trying to be original, I have a thing which I think I mentioned when I did my Penguin live lecture. I had a thing where I talked about trying to make sure that your act was on fire, F-I-R-E. So make sure that everything in your act is either funny, interesting, relevant, or entertaining. And basically just editing out everything in your act that isn't any of those four things. And it's nice.
It sounds a lot like the Ken Weber approach, where he's saying you're either explaining what he's got direct words, but you're either explaining what the trick is, making them laugh, or revealing what it is. You're either rapting attention or making them laugh or revealing that.
Yeah, exactly. But there's so many times you watch an act and there's stuff that isn't funny, interesting, relevant, or entertaining. It's just talk. It's stuff.
Fire. I love that.
Yeah,
funny, interesting, relevant, entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. Just make sure your act's on fire is how I always say it. But if you watch any good act, you won't see much fat on the bone.
Right.
All those moments. You go and watch Matt King at Harrah's, and you won't see a sentence that isn't required, funny, interesting, needed. It's every. They just get rid of it.
Spectator, there won't be a moment where you're like, I should look at my phone and see if I have any messages.
No,
that
exactly.
won't happen. You'll just be in the zone.
Exactly, and it's the same with all the great performers. They've honed their act down to just solid. And what that does is it just brings all the laughs closer together. It brings all of the interesting moments closer together. It brings all of the gasps closer together. So everything just seems much punchier.
Yeah, and I think that is also something that I want to ask about, but also a really relevant thing, which is editing down your act. And we always try to refine our magic, but it ends up being change. Like it often ends up being changing something, and just to be conscious of looking at your act and saying what does not need to be here, and it's the same as like, video editing and things like that. You have to have a keen eye and say like, maybe I like this, but this doesn't need to be here. We're trimming everything that isn't great.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that you can't have silence. You can have silence. You could have a minute of complete silence if it was right for the routine. If that moment just needed some real tension and nothing being said and possibly very little being done. And you do see some acts that do that, but they're very much aware that is part of the routine and part of the process.
It's intentional.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that is a really key thing with making a great routine or a great show, is that everything that you do is intentional, and you can break every rule that anyone has come up with so long as it's intentional, and so long as you're getting what the intention was out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to better your act twofold. And the reason for that is it's not only going to cut out the dead time and the fat that you don't need to have in your act anymore, but that time that gets cut out is going to have to be filled with stuff that is more entertaining, funny, or magical, right?
That's
so
right.
If you have a 10-minute act, you cut out 7 minutes, you just got another 7 minutes to do more awesome stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point. Well, awesome. We are starting to wrap up, and there's a couple of different things that we do when we wrap up. And the first is the Macarena. Cue the music. No.
Love that.
Well, we can. So the first is, right now, listening to us, it's at least 2-3 million magicians at home. So what I'm wondering is, at least, like that's the lowest
bare
it could be. Yeah, the bare minimum, really. But if there's something that you wanted to tell magicians, like a PSA, something that you want them all to know, what would it be?
Oh, you could have warned me about this. Never, ever, ever do the vanishing bandana. We've had enough now. Copperfield did it well. Everything else has been second rate after that. Nobody. Everybody knows a banana's a banana. Nobody says bandana anymore. It just stop. Step away from the bandana. That's what I want people to do.
I think that's a great piece of advice. It's like no more. No more. Retire it. Hang the jersey up. No more.
Yeah.
No more bandanas. So the last thing that we do around the end of the episode is, in fact, the Macarena. No. The last thing that we do is we each go and mention something from the episode that we thought was particularly valuable. Something that, we've been talking for just shy of an hour, and a lot of people at home, they're probably cooking while they listen or watching... watching paint dry. I don't know what people do. Whatever. Yeah. They're like driving or cooking or whatever, and they might have zoned in or out. So I just want to be able to isolate a valuable or the most valuable nugget. So for me, it was the fire formula. I think that that's incredible, and I think more than anything, it's just something tangible in front of you that you can hold. Like say hold in your hand, but they're letters, but you can hold in your hand while you're editing.
Mental hand.
Exactly. While you're editing your show. So you're not just going like, oh, should this stay? Should this not stay? Should this whatever?
Yeah.
As silly as it is, it kind of is like an equation or like a formula. You go, can this stay? Yes, it can. Can this stay? Is it funny? No. Is it interesting? No. Is it relevant? No. Is it entertaining? No. Sorry. It's gotta go.
Yeah.
So I really, really love that, and that's something that I'm absolutely going to be using for myself. Tyler, what about you?
I liked the part at the beginning we were talking about choosing who you take your advice from. And the reason for that is it really solidifies that it's your show in my mind. And that, in my personal opinion, I think you can listen to, advice from anybody out there ever. It's just up to you to choose which advice you want to take and which advice you want to leave where it is. And the other thing that I found super interesting about, or not super interesting, but
it was not interesting at all, actually.
You know what? Fuck it. Fuck my second point. No, I think it's something that we were talking about. How every episode we're like, how do you do this? And the guest says a lot. Yeah. Another thing that we hear is like, how do I decide which magic is right for me and what my character should be and what fits in my show? And the formula always seems to be understand yourself. And I think that that's super, poetic almost, that the solution to a lot of people's magic problems is just like a little bit of self-exploration and just be solidified in who you are and then go out there and do it a lot. And to me that sounds, beautiful.
Sounds good.
And of course, you, John, what is it, or is there something from the episode that you thought was a particularly valuable nugget? And yes, you can talk about things that you yourself said. We're just looking for the best take-home nugget for the people at home.
I think the bit I said about experience, don't be in too much of a rush to try and get there, because what can happen is you do create a false character too quickly, because you just think, I want to be there, I want to be there. Don't be afraid to be in that learning space, because you will eventually find out who you are, which I think also fits in with the thing we talked about not necessarily having set ways of dealing with situations. So listening to the audience and thinking, I need to do this at this point, or I need to do that. So not being in a rush and being flexible. We might not have even spoken about flexibility, but I just did.
but I think it's really good. And one of the things I wanted to highlight about what you just said is, the flatness of preparing lines in exchange with other people's lines. Like obviously it's not going to be the most in the moment feeling positive, great response that you could have done in that moment, right? It's going to feel like a weird canned response that you say to hecklers, and I think it's more likely that you're going to lose the side of the audience than win it,
Yeah. I'll tell you what, a thing that I deliberately did. I should have mentioned this earlier, really, now, because we're wrapping up. But I'm going to carry on talking anyway, and you'll have to worry about editing it. No, I used to do a lot of prop gags. I was influenced, like I said, by Tommy Cooper. I used to do a lot of prop gags and visual stuff, and I used to enjoy doing it. But there's a magician over here, comedian magician Noel Britton. I don't know if you know Noel, but
Tommy Cooper.
Tommy Cooper. Well, Noel sort of said to me that he didn't think the prop gag suited me, and I wasn't sure whether he was right or not. But I respected him as a performer, and I thought, I'm going to try and wean myself off, because they were a little bit of a comfort blanket. They were just there on my table, and when I needed some thinking time, I could pick up a prop, I could say the line, and I could think about what I was doing next. And I thought, what I really want to do is I want to improve my ad-libbing skills. I want to improve my just coming up with stuff on the spur of the moment. But the sort of challenge is, how do you do that? So what I started to do is I dropped the prop gags and just stopped putting them out on my table. But in routines, I had moments where I decided I would break from the routine and chat to whoever was with me, or chat to somebody in the audience. But I always had the safety of knowing that if that was going nowhere, I wasn't getting laughs, I could immediately step back into the routine at the point I'd come out and carry on. And that really helped me change who I was. I changed quite a bit over that period of a year or two of doing that, of losing the prop gags, losing all the comfort blankets, the things that I knew would get laughs, and just making myself talk to the audience and try things out, but always knowing that I'd got the skeleton, the script to go back onto.
And it sounds like there's a really good sweet spot once you have a show.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And what you're able to do then is you're able to say, today I'm going to go out to my show and I'm going to try my best not to use all of these gags, right?
Yeah.
You can say,
Yeah.
today I'm going to, before each trick, I'm going to take a moment and interact with the audience. Because you have already a show that has a beginning, middle, and end. You've done it. They react. They laugh. Haha. Hooray. You've got it, And once you're there, making it better is... you can do things like you're describing, which I think is really helpful, which is to sort of give yourself this, this new rule or this new opportunity or this new thing that you're going to be focused on during your show so that you can make sure that you're able to actually change and not sort of, I like what you said before, these, what did you call them? A professional bad magician or...
professionals who are great, but I mean, in all aspects of entertainment, but specifically in magic, we know them.
Well, there you go. I think that was amazing. Big, huge thank you to you, John, for all of the amazing info and help. A lot of this stuff I'm taking personally because I'm doing a lot more performing now, and it's very awesome to be taking advice from the top of the game like you. And of course, to everybody at home, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you got as much out of that as I did, and as
I hope
usual,
you got more.
Yeah, hope you got more out of it.
You more than I do,
more,
Jonah,
much more.
so,
more. And give yourself a pat on the back, because once again, you spent an hour talking about magic, and we did not talk about how the tricks work. So give yourself a pat on the back. You can do it. You can focus on all the
It's possible. It's possible.
It is possible. It's possible. You can make it. So big, huge thank you, and we will see you all next Thursday.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, booyah. Episode 51 is in the books, and next week is the episode 52. Now, there's a couple of quick things I want to tell you before I let you go. The first is, next week is the Browser Bash in Toronto. So if you are going to be at the Browser Bash in Toronto, the big, huge Toronto Magic Convention, send us a message, let us know, we will see you there. The second thing is, if after 51 episodes you still have not joined our newsletter, now is the time to do it, because there's some big things coming from episode 52 and beyond, and we want you to be a part of it. So that is the place to know you're getting our updates and not have to hope that you get it through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. That's the news. So there you go. That's everything, and we will see you next week at episode 52. Booyah!